We are recording 3, 2, and 1. This is the month of March, but on today's Locked On Big Ten podcast, this is Marsh. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Locked On Big Ten podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Ben Stevens. It is Friday, March 26th, and on today's episode, it is a full weekend preview of our one matchup for the Sweet 16 coming out of the Big Ten Conference. And like I mentioned at the open, it is a very, very special day here on the Locked On Big Ten podcast because it is the future. It is Jake Marsh of Barstool working with Part of My Take as the sports business reporter, also the host of Barstool Bench Mob, one of the best college basketball podcasts you will find across the internet. So, Jake, very happy to have you on the podcast. Appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me, Ben. Those are some very nice words from you. I really appreciate it. But it is the best time of year, so you can't complain in March.
If anybody knows what March is, it's a man with a last name that is very similar to the month that we are in, a great, great month. And I mentioned, this is a full weekend preview, but normally we have a lot of games to detail in the preview. This, just one Sweet 16 matchup out of the Big Ten Conference, but a good one. The only chalk matchup we have across the entire NCAA tournament. The number 1 seed in the East region, Michigan. The number 4 seed in the East region, Florida State. Before we dive into the game, give our picks and predictions and our winners for this weekend of the Sweet 16. Jake, I have to ask you, because this is the only Big Ten matchup we have, were you surprised by what you saw out of the Big Ten Conference so far in the Big Dance?
I was. I thought there was no shot I would lose to Oregon. I actually thought Oregon's layoff, they had the bye by forfeit or whatever, like obviously an unfortunate deal with the VCU COVID issue. But I thought they'd come out flat. They came out the exact opposite, putting up 95 on that Iowa defense. And then you have one of the more historical upsets we've seen in Oral Roberts. Not only Oral Roberts beating Ohio State, then getting the Sweet 16 against Florida. It's interesting. I thought it was good that good for the conference that Maryland beat UConn. I did not have that happening. But yeah, the fact that there's only one team left is stunning.
Jake, I had 5 Big Ten teams in my Elite Eight. And yes, I acknowledge my bias. They call me Big Ten Ben. But I had 5 Big Ten teams and featuring an all Big Ten South regional final between Purdue and Ohio State. And that ended on the very first night. So yes, a very, very shocking time. I will ask you your Final Four later based on where it stands right now with the Sweet 16. But I think we dive into the matchup. The 4 seed in the East region, Florida State. The number 1 seed in the East region, Michigan. As our friends at betonline.ag see it, Michigan a 2.5-point favorite at the moment. The over-under total 143.5. The line has moved slightly down from 3 where it opened in the favor of Michigan. The over up by 3 total points as well at 143.5. A great crew on the call. Sunday tip, 5 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Jim Nance, Tracy Wolfson on the sideline, of course, with Bill Raftery and Grant Hill. Jake, as you approach this game, the Seminoles and the Wolverines, how do you see it breaking down?
Yeah, like you said, the only chalk matchup in the Sweet 16, and it is my personal favorite, one I'm looking forward to, aside from Syracuse with the bias, of course, both of us being alums. But no, Florida State and Michigan, I think both teams are on a mission a little bit in terms of proving haters wrong. Because after Michigan lost Livers, people were like, see ya, they can't win it all. And then with Florida State, I don't know. People are always talking about the down ACC. They lost to Georgia Tech in that conference championship game. I feel like they've flown under the radar the entire season, right? Just because no one's giving the ACC credit. So this is all looking for revenge. Like down in LA, I believe Michigan went to the Final Four, went to the championship on Nova. So yeah, it's going to Hunter Dickinson, obviously unbelievable. Memphis' length and depth between Scotty Barnes, MJ Walker, Raekwon Gray, Anthony Play. The list goes on. I can't wait for this one.
It's wild that Florida State plays a 10-man rotation, and that's not just something you hear across college basketball. They truly play guys about 7-8 minutes a game that go 10 deep, and that's what Leonard Hamilton likes to do. And I think if you look overall at Michigan getting through this NCAA tournament, the round of 64 against Texas Southern, yes, you beat a 16 seed, but didn't perform all that well in the second half against a 16 seed who outscored you in those final 20 minutes. But against LSU, and yes, Cam Thomas had 30 points, and yes, Javonte Smart had 27, but I think overall the team defense from Michigan was very good. The Tigers shot just 39% as a team from the field, 28% from 3. And outside of that, especially the final 10 minutes or so, Jake, I thought they controlled the pace. And I think that will be very, very key against Florida State, who has that incredible depth and likes to play a little bit faster, the 89th fastest tempo, according to Kenneth Pomeroy. but they allow their opponents to play at a slower pace, allowing their opponents to play at the 294th slowest possession length in all of the country. And that suits Michigan, who plays at the 246th slowest tempo in all of college basketball. A lot of numbers there to do with possession length and whatnot, but I think that will be a key for Michigan to control the pace of this game against the Noles. My biggest key, though, Jake, and I'd love to get your thoughts on him as an NBA prospect and what he means to this Michigan team, is Franz Wagner. Because in the absence of Isaiah Livers, I thought if one guy was going to have to step up above the rest, it would be Franz Wagner. And he only had 8 points against Ohio State in that Big Ten tournament game where he shot 2 of 10 from the field, fouled out with 11 minutes left in that game. Not a very impressive performance. Only 9 points against Texas Southern in the round of 64. He did have 15 against LSU, but was just 1 of 4 in the first half from the field and then 4 of 5 in the second. And you saw him emerge in those final 8 minutes, provided great energy, especially defensively with a couple of key stops. They need that for 40 minutes against Florida State if they are going to get a win. But I will say this. If Franz Wagner performs, they get the contributions from guys like Eli Brooks and Shawnee Brown. Mike Smith controls the pace as their point guard. And if Hunter Dickinson can have some success against Balsa Koprivica, I hope I pronounced his name correctly, or the other guys that Florida State has down low.
Koprivica. I'll help you out there.
Yep. Koprivica. Thank you very much.
Balsa Koprivica, yeah.
I think if that happens, Michigan will win this game. Of course, Big Ten Ben is not going to pick against the only team from the Big Ten in the Sweet 16 right now. But I think if Michigan can control the pace and they get a great game from Franz Wagner for all 40 minutes, Michigan advances to the Elite Eight. Jake, what do you think about Franz Wagner and the rotation that he plays within Juwan Howard's crew?
Yeah, it's certainly critical. And obviously the go-to guy is Hunter Dickinson. But looking at Franz Wagner's past games, something that sticks out to me is he needs to stay out of foul trouble in this game. He fouled out against Ohio State in that game you mentioned, and he had 3 fouls in each of those 2 tournament games against Texas Southern and LSU. Plus, if you look at the box score against LSU for Michigan, you'll notice aside with 2 guys who played just 9 minutes, there's just guys on the floor.
Yeah.
They played 8 total guys, but besides Austin Davis and Terrence Williams, they had 9 minutes each. You only had 6 guys in the rotation. Plus, we talked about earlier how FSU is so deep in a 10-man rotation. You can't have Hunter Dickinson or Franz Wagner having 2 fouls in the first 10 minutes, because then that is a serious issue in my opinion.
Absolutely. And we're waiting for the latest health status update on Isaiah Livers. But Juwan Howard said after the win over LSU on Monday night that there was nothing really new. He was still out indefinitely, coming back from a stress fracture in his right foot. I don't expect him to be there. We've seen him on the sideline cheering on his teammates with a boot on that right foot. But they are really only going to go 8 deep. And Terrence Williams is not a guy that saw a lot of run throughout the year. Brandon Johns has been inserted into the starting lineup. He has played pretty well. But outside of that, to match the depth of Florida State, that's why I think Michigan really needs to control the pace. If they do, and they get a good game from Franz Wagner, all 40 minutes long, I think Michigan wins this one and covers that 2.5-point spread. Jake Marsh, how do you see it? Do you think Michigan advances to the round of 8, the Elite 8, or do you think Florida State will be the ones getting past Sunday?
So in my bracket before the tournament started, I did have this matchup and I did have FSU winning the game. So I really can't go back and and change it now because it's my bracket. So I got to stick to my guns here. But look, Michigan, it stinks about the Livers injury. Eli Brooks made more than 50% of his threes against LSU. You figure someone's going to need to have a hot shooting night because Hunter Dickinson, obviously, as great as he's been, I feel like you can't simulate the FSU bigs or the FSU length because in Big Ten, you know, you're one-on-one against the Garza, right? It's Wisconsin, you know, like the but FSU has so many different options down low, whether it's Koprivica, Scotty Ball comes off the bench for LSU. He's probably their best FSU. He's probably their best NBA prospect. Ray 6'8", Anthony Polite 6'6". So we'll see.
It's going to be a very interesting matchup. When you look at all of the depth that Florida State has, I didn't even realize Scotty Barnes was coming off the bench. I thought he started with all the hype that he gets for the NBA draft. So that's another wrinkle that Leonard Hamilton and Florida State can throw in there. So I appreciate you sticking with your guns. I respect that, as you already had your bracket picked. You had this matchup, as did I in my Sweet 16, and you have Florida State advancing. I have Michigan moving on to the Elite Eight. So you can either give me your Final Four that you had originally in your bracket. I think we're having a couple technological issues here, but Jake, you still got me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, cool. Your picture is frozen, but that's fine for the folks watching on WKYC on Cleveland's site. But we still have Jake Marsh, the future, with us right now. Give me your original Final Four and give me your Final Four as it stands right now with the 16 teams still playing in the NCAA tournament.
So original Final Four was Gonzaga, Alabama, Arkansas, and Illinois. So I've got 3 of the 4 still remaining, and I still have 7 of my 8 Elite 8 still alive. So I did have Gonzaga over Illinois in the title game, so that's busted a little bit. But aside from Illinois, I think I'm in a solid spot right now. I can still shoot up the leaderboards in these bracket leagues. So I got to stick with those 3. And then the Midwest region, which is chaos. I mean, come on. I'm obviously taking the Orange. There's no debate there. I really think they can do it.
I agree with you. My Midwest region had Illinois getting out of it. I had Illinois winning the national championship. It is a take I had fostered since the early time of December that Illinois' best was the Big Ten's best. Obviously, that is not the case anymore, but still, out of the Midwest region, I would look to Loyola Chicago or Syracuse right now. I think that's where my focus is. In the South, I have Baylor, but like you, in the West, I had Gonzaga. In the East, originally I had Texas. Now I'm going to go with Michigan. That's just how I feel.
Okay.
If Michigan can advance to the Elite 8, Alabama is a very, very scary team. And I don't think the Tide get enough credit for what they do defensively. They are known for their three-point shooting style, for what they can do down low, getting the ball in there, and they love to dunk. That's Nate Oates' style that he brought from the NBA or tries to mirror the NBA. But I'm going to go with Michigan right now because I need all of my hopes into the final Big Ten team that we have still available, and that is the Michigan Wolverines. So, Jake, give me some other thoughts on this Sweet 16 weekend, some of the other games you are most looking forward to here in the Big Dance.
Yeah, I guess general thoughts from a wider lens is it really is crazy that we have 1 Big Ten and 1 Big 12 team left because those have been by far the best 2 conferences all year round, and there's been no close third, right? You have Michigan as the 1 seed in the East, Baylor as the 1 seed in the South. Everyone else is gone. And then how about the emergence of the Pac-12? Obviously, from like a media perspective, they don't get as much props just because I guess the times, every game being 11 p.m. or whatever.
Right.
But that USC-Oregon game is really sneaky. Oregon, as we mentioned earlier, blew out Iowa, 95 points. USC blew out Kansas. Jayhawks were never in that game. I think the winner of that game can give Gonzaga a fight. I don't think they'll win it, but I think it'll be a sweat for Gonzaga in that Elite 8 game in the West.
We both acknowledge our bias as Syracuse grads, although this is a Big Ten podcast. I actually believe that Syracuse matches up favorably against Houston. I had Rutgers, a team out of the Big Ten, upsetting Houston in the round of 32, and that should have happened had Rutgers got to the free throw line maybe just once in the second half. When you're up 9, under 5 minutes left in a college basketball game, and you don't attempt a single free throw, that's something wrong. So Rutgers kind of lost that game, I think, more than Houston won it. And I think Syracuse presents a challenge for them because of the 2-3 zone that we are seeing at its finest right now in the NCAA tournament. One final question for you, Jake, about the Big Ten. Let's go out and throw this scenario out there. It's a hypothetical I've asked a few guests on this show this week. If Michigan, for whatever reason, is able to advance and eventually win a national championship game, cutting down the nets on April 5th, 2021, how do you think the Big Ten in this postseason will be remembered? Will it be the overall structure of 8 of the 9 teams not getting out of the opening weekend? Or will it be Michigan winning a national championship, ending the streak of a Big Ten team not winning a national title in over 2 decades?
I think it's the latter because that's all you ever hear as we get the bracket and selection Sunday is, oh, Big Ten's winning it. They haven't won in 20 years. So I think the champion's a champion and they would represent the conference. I think 20 years down the line, when you think of the 2021 tournament, you'll of course think of the bubble in Indianapolis, but you'll also think who won it all? Oh, Michigan. They ended that drought since, Michigan State in 2000?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's what I would say.
I have to agree with you. Only one team can win a national title. You only remember the national champion at the ending of an NCAA tournament. When you think of one shining moment, it's the team cutting down the nets. If Michigan is able to do that, although they have a very staunch test against Florida State in the Sweet 16, and then beyond that, possibly facing Alabama, that would be a great game as well. But if Michigan is able to do it and become the national champion on April 5th, 2021, I think that's how the Big Ten is remembered. He is the future, looking into the future for this Sunday's game in the Sweet 16 between Michigan, the number 1 seed in the East, and Florida State, the number 4 seed in the East. Jake Marsh, this is Marsh. a guy that works for Part of My Take as their sports business reporter, but also hosting Barstool Bench Mob, one of the best college sports and college hoops podcasts you will find out there. Jake, I appreciate your time. Thank you for dealing with some of these technological issues and giving us a great preview and breakdown for the Sweet 16 this Sunday between Michigan and Florida State.
Yeah, thank you, Ben, once again for having me. Go Orange. A little biased
Go
once
Orange.
again, but it's hard to hide it when they're in the Sweet 16 as an 11 seed. So
when things are going this well in March, and that's what you're remembered for, it's hard to acknowledge the bias at times too. Here, I'm going to point to this. Let's see if I can get it. There it is. The Syracuse Carrier Dome next to the Big Ten flags. So you keep the two pieces of my heart at bay throughout this month of March. Jake Marsh, again, thank you very much for your time.
All right. Thank you, Ben.